Hello, everybody. Again, I'm Rob Behnke, CEO over at Halborn, and I am absolutely stoked to be able to have this conversation today. So I wanted to go ahead and introduce our panel. The topic is Web3 Wars, A New Hope, really just the conversation around this transition between and convergence between the worlds of Web2 and Web3. So on our panel today, we have Leung, CISO over at Coinbase Custody, Adam Healy, the Chief Security Officer over at BlockFi, and Jens Porup over at Avalabs. Yeah, I'd love to have all of you just give us a quick intro about yourselves to get this kick started. So I'll pass it over to Jens.
Alphabetical order, I see. Ava.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
My name is Jens. I'm the CISO at Ava Labs. I've been in and around security for about 20 years. I've worn most of the hats and looking forward to today's panel. I think B for BlockFi is therefore next.
Yeah, let's do Adam.
I'll go next. That's fine. Adam Healy. I've been the security officer at BlockFi for approaching 2.5 years. It's been a wild ride. Have been through kind of hyper growth mode here at BlockFi for a while now, and I've been full-time in crypto for about 5 years. So just glad to be here on the panel.
Yeah, and Leung, I've been with Coinbase for 4 years now and been in security for 15 years. Did my tour of duty in defense, finance, healthcare, building security programs there. And yeah, the past 5 years watching crypto grow up has been extremely exciting.
Amazing. Well, can't thank you all for being here today for this panel. The range of people that are here listening and watching this particular panel definitely varies. And there's a lot of people that have been messaging me today about what are they kind of like the first steps getting into the Web3 security world. And so rather than diving into those steps, I actually wanted to ask, how did all the three of you first start getting into this industry? And really, like, what were kind of the first steps that you took, or maybe even talking about kind of the first like jumps you took to get full-time into this industry? We'll stick with my silly order here, so we can go with Jens to start.
I don't think that what worked for us 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago is going to work for people trying to get into InfoSec today. I don't think that's really helpful or repeatable advice. The one thing I would say is that my constant joke is 95% of what I do has nothing to do with blockchain. I'm worried about all of the usual blue team security stuff. So, going down the smart contract auditing rabbit hole is great if you want to audit smart contracts, but may not make you a well-rounded blue team security engineer who I want to interview and hire.
Love it. Adam.
So I think like how I started in crypto, or why I took the jump, was prior to my life in crypto, I spent a number of years in the government, and it's real easy to see like how inefficient things are. And I think that is especially pronounced in our financial services industry. And given the opportunity back in kind of 2017 to move into crypto full time, it made a lot of sense for me to kind of marry up I would say like a quasi-traditional security background coming from the military and then spending some more years in the government space, along with physical security and some other areas that I've worked on at different points in my career. Kind of all of that stuff comes to bear in securing crypto assets, and it's a very interesting kind of space to move into. I think kind of getting started though, much to the previous point, I don't think it's as complicated as some make it out to be, and I think the types of individuals and the skill sets that are needed are much more simply defined as compared to kind of the traditional like AppSec type of pedigree. I think there's a lot of other approachable ways to enter the space, contribute to the security mission that is not to the point auditing smart contracts or doing pen tests or doing things along those lines.
Cool. Yeah, how I got into crypto, prior to joining Coinbase, we were trying to spearhead the decentralized patient identities within healthcare. And so in my past role, we were trying to bring together a lot of different healthcare organizations for that project. And then Coinbase came around, and that was into the rabbit hole really deep in terms of all the different ways that crypto can be used. For your question of how do you enter security, I would recommend that you don't take the standard path of going for a security major and just go straight into cyber. It's major in something you're passionate about and then pivot into security, because that becomes your edge in terms of your ability to see problems differently than anyone else in the industry. And that's how you sell, that's how you market yourself, and that's how you stand out from everyone else's resumes.
Awesome. By the way, everyone watching, if you do have questions for this panel, go ahead and throw it into the Slack channel here. We want this to be a little interactive as well. So given your day-to-day lives now, sort of, being in the C-suite of these major orgs, I mean, do you feel like you have support in the C-suite? When it comes to, I feel like, when you work with any major corporation, you're dealing with budgets and, how do you get resources? So like, what has that kind of been like in your sort of day-to-day, in general? Anyone?
Well, I'm the only one, so maybe I'll hop in.
All right.
So I think, look, like, security is a support function. Now, don't get me wrong, it has to be a core competency for any firm dealing in crypto, but we're here to support the business, right? We're here to add as much risk management, as much safety, and at the same time enable the business. So I think if you approach it from that lens, gaining support from your C-suite peers is not as hard as maybe it was previously, because there's direct correlation of having a mature, robust security program in crypto to business upside. So I think for me, from day one, and I was kind of lucky enough, and it's funny how these things happen, is my first week at BlockFi was in June of 2020, which anyone who knows BlockFi history, not that anyone here should, it was about 2 weeks after a May 15th data breach that BlockFi had. So kind of coming into a firm that is on the heels of a data breach, there's a lot more you can kind of get done much faster, generally speaking. So kind of from day one, a lot of support from our founders, a lot of support from our CFO, a lot of support from the board. Made my job a lot easier, but I think for folks that are running like mature security programs, where it's not just a handful of folks, there's actually teams of teams. You do end up spending a lot less of your time focused on core security challenges and more focused on relationship management, meeting with the CFO, meeting with legal, working with compliance, working with law enforcement, working with third-party auditors and regulators, and like that's, I would say, like more of the bulk of my day as compared to actually like directing and managing like day-to-day security operations. Yeah,
for us, we definitely have, just joining Coinbase, security was like the #1 priority in terms of this is one area where we will not compromise. And so that continues to be the case. It's never been a challenge to get funding or get initiatives, have security be an initiative, but given that responsibility, we do need, as security practitioners, we need to be responsible with that responsibility. So it's more of making sure that the business is focused to reduce risk in specific areas, and we make recommendations that are achievable and not just say what problems are and leave it at that. So yeah.
I think one of the pleasures of working in security and crypto is that unlike many, not all, but many Fortune 500 companies where it is a good business decision to underspend in security because the negative externalities don't really affect you. Whereas in crypto, management has to care about security, because if they don't, then they get popped and then bad things happen, which means that you're not like fighting this uphill battle half the time trying to argue that security matters. Well, I think it's pretty obvious to everybody here that it matters a great deal. And the only question is how to do it the most efficiently as possible, how to manage risk as with minimum time and money expenditure. I think that's the only real question, not whether it is important at all. A conversation you might well have at any other large, Fortune 500 company. So I think, certainly from where I sit, I have full support of management for my role.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, we talked about that all day today about how, you see a headline with a credit card company and PII stolen and credit card numbers are stolen. You see right next to an article about how there's yet another $25 million DeFi hack happening. And there's a very clear correlation as to why that's important to take that seriously. It makes a lot of sense. And, we've been talking today as well about how this industry just moves at absolute lightning speed. I mean, how do all of you attempt to even like keep up with all the data that's constantly flowing, all of your, monitoring and the information that's going on? I mean, how do you kind of help filter through the noise and attempt to drive an effective security program in this industry?
Look, I think it's impossible, right? Like, it's impossible to say that, especially if you're running, we have hundreds of employees in a multitude of countries, 24/7 security operations. Like, there's a lot going on, and it's impossible to say that I will personally be involved in every alert or every incident or every piece of threat intel or every, good pen test finding that Halborn finds, right? Like, it's just impossible to say, like, I will look at everything. So I think, like, what it really boils down to is you've got to be an expert at building a good team. And it just starts with hiring smart people that have the aptitude, the maturity, and the execution drive to get things done. And, something like a term that I've used for years is like, you've got to build the machine, right? Like, build the machine and then let it run. For us, it's and for anyone, for all of us, it's so easy to get inundated in specific details, but you've got to be comfortable and trusting the folks that you've brought in and that you've hired and that you've charged with certain things, and then managing things at the appropriate level. But don't get me wrong, like, I love whiteboarding through our, e-sharding protocol for DR. Like, I love doing that stuff, whatever it is. But at the same time, like, that might not be the most like leveraged position or discussion for me to engage on, like, on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Adam. It's the people, you need to surround yourself with smart people so that you can scale. And our jobs here as CISOs is really to distill that complexity down to themes, strategy, and execution points so that everybody can move at the same pace toward a common goal that matches the business goal. So yeah, it starts with people though. You need good people around you.
And not micromanaging them. Like, I often find that I'm more like making speeches on Slack saying, these are the things we should be caring about, and then letting people take the ball and run with it, as opposed to telling people, you should do this, 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 and this, which gets irritating. And it's not very successful. So I think just being able to articulate the security vision, both to the company at large, to executives, and to rank and file employees is a key part of the role too.
Right. This makes total sense. Let's take a page from that then. I mean, like, when you think about as you're managing your team and all of the many attack vectors that kind of exist out there, I mean, and then just given your wealth of experience now in this industry collectively, what do you think is something that's, you've all trained for a very long time in the world of security. What has surprised you in your role? Like, any particular like attack vectors or things that are just like came out of complete left field, like that you can talk about, by the way? I don't know if anyone wants to go first on that.
Yeah, there's two things that top of mind, right? Like, one is we all know and we all agree that third-party risk, vendor management is like an incredibly important thing. And it's been surprising, say over the last like 5 years, maybe 7 years-ish, probably since like Target thing and like whatever that was, 14 or 15, that like, even though this is proven to be this common situation that has unfolded over and over again, the lack of awareness outside of security circles of really like the risk involved, right? Like it's always very interesting to me to like talk with someone who's not like core into the security community and is like, oh yeah, well like it's really surprising that that XYZ firm got compromised. I'm like, well, not really, because like they got compromised through a third-party vendor who wasn't exactly up to par and somebody signed off on it. And then the other thing that I would say, which I think dovetails in that nicely, because I think especially some of the compromises that we've seen recently, I won't name company names for, there's 600 and some people on this chat, and there's probably somebody at every company, but some of the compromises that we've seen recently in say the last 12 months, the simplicity of some of them, right? Social engineering, phone call, remote access piece of like, remote desktop software deployed through a malicious link that was socially engineered while on the phone, like just like the simplicity of somebody getting a foothold in a, what I would consider a top tier environment with a simple social engineering call and, AnyDesk or whatever your flavor of remote desktop tool is du jour. Like that to me still blows my mind.
Yeah, what really surprises me, and less as we continue down this journey of Web3 and DeFi, is how many people simply trust the smart contracts that get released and how much money ends up behind these things. Because obviously being in Coinbase, we get to really scrutinize the code and look at all the vulnerabilities of some of these DeFi applications. And 1 minute we're reviewing it, next minute it's up to $100 million in behind that smart contract, and another 200, and then all of a sudden all these people are pouring money in, and you realize that bridges are getting hacked, and a simple line of code, a misconfiguration, results in a full draining of funds. And so it's just this ecosystem that's, you could tell that it's very young, very mature, or immature at the moment, and people are just trusting that it's a website, it must be safe. so that's,
if I could say one thing to like dovetail on that, and if it's like one thing that anyone takes away from anything I've said, it is every line of code is a unit of risk. And humans wrote the code, and none of us are perfect. And yeah. I think it's one of the things, like every line of code is a unit of risk. Plan accordingly.
Yeah.
That does raise serious existential questions for the blockchain community when we are assuming security by correctness on immutable things like blockchains. I think the thing that really surprised me moving into the cryptocurrency space was I wouldn't say for any of my current or past employers, but the YOLO attitude towards launching new projects. It's one thing to YOLO build a mobile app and try to make some money on the App Store, but copy pasting that development life cycle into, we're just going to do a DeFi thing and we'll see if anyone likes it, and then you get popped. You're like, well, it's not the same thing. You have to have a completely different mentality. And even after week after week after week of years of security incidents, it's like people seem to think, oh, it can't happen to me. I don't know when that stops.
We're not building ways to share photos on the internet, right? Like the compromise of like real impact.
Well, I mean, Jens, you're someone that represents one of these DeFi blockchain layer ones, and there's many use cases of Avalanche that Avalabs is helping to progress. How are you thinking about sort of your security mix versus what you would in sort of a more traditional, quote traditional, sort of more centralized world?
Well, I think the blessing I have compared to the two other panelists is I have almost zero compliance obligations as a layer one. I spend somewhere between 0 and 1% of my time thinking about compliance. So this liberates me to really pragmatically prioritize security risks because I don't have to always be thinking, what's compliance going to say? What's compliance going to say? I can do like, we have to do this because we don't want to get hacked. Okay, let's do it. Boom, done. Move on. So this is really great. This is really great. I mean, I fully get that you need compliance to enable businesses like Coinbase and BlockFi, but I am fortunately in the position where that is not top of mind.
Love it.
See ya.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Well, so with dealing with this, then I mean, so I think, I mean, just going back to, you know, attempting to extrapolate some and extract some value with this, with everyone that's watching this, you know, there's a lot of people that are watching this that are currently still working in the more traditional Web2 world. And, you know, I was curious, but that being said, at this point, I feel like every major Fortune 500, every bank, you know, we just got done talking about, you know, digital currencies. I mean, it feels like digital assets are now going to start being embedded into most, if not all, of the companies. So if you're a fashion house, you have your NFT metaverse play. If you're, you know, a bank, you obviously have your custody needs. You know, we were having conversations recently with you know, a major fashion house and learning kind of how they're custodying keys around you know, some of their metaverse NFTs. And, you know, I think you can kind of go understand where I'm going with this. You know, what kind of like almost 101 or even 201 kind of advice would you give for people that have now been mandated, hey, security team, hey, dev team, we have to go spin up this whole metaverse NFT thing? What advice would you give for them in sort of a microcosm, since we only have so much time? And I know that all of you could go on for hours about this, but.
I mean, it's a great question. And Rob, you and I have had dozens of conversations about this over the last few years. We are in an interesting position where we've actually built a lot of our own tooling for, and maybe not a unique position, I won't say that. We're in a position where we built a lot of our own tooling to solve some of these problems internally, obviously. And we have had a lot of, like hundreds probably in the last couple of years, conversations with institutions that are looking to do X, Y, or Z in crypto. And they've asked for some time to kind of brainstorm these exact scenarios with us. So I don't know that there's like a salient piece of like technical advice I would give. I'll defer to the others if they have that. But I think like from a structural perspective, I would say, you know, like the four of us look really unapproachable. I know it's like insane to think, but like the crypto security community is like pretty approachable, and like you can find us, and like we're on Twitter, and like we're on LinkedIn, and like you can email us, like ask questions. So like my one like piece of structural advice would be like, don't try and do it yourself. If you've never managed like PKI or HSM infrastructure or something like fairly material like that, don't try and like do this yourself, because the downside impact could be significant. Like get some advice, get some help, reach out. There's obviously firms like Halborn that are experts in this and they have like professional services baked around this. And there's a lot of knowledge that the broader security ecosystem within security is happy to share. I'm, you know, I wouldn't say I'm always happy to jump on a Zoom, but like if somebody's got a good question and wants to talk about some stuff, I'm pretty happy to hop on a Zoom and walk them through it.
Yeah, the key is to determine what type of value proposition you're trying to offer and what risks you want to own and which risks do you just want a third party to handle. And if you're not in position to make that analysis, then talk to any one of these firms, that panelist firms, right? And we're all experienced in having these conversations. We on a daily basis we have conversations with companies that are interested to move into this space, and it doesn't cost anything to get that level of advice.
I'd agree with the theme here. Outsource it. Like if you're a traditional Web 2.0 company with no deep in-house security experience, then you're probably going to mess it up the first time around. It's going to be cheaper all around just to have that with somebody who specializes in that instead.
Absolutely. And, speaking with the three of you that do specialize in this side of the world of security, I'm curious, there's all of the news and all like the sort of nonsense media about sort of, the ups and downs of price volatility and so on. And then there's the reality of, I feel like I'm speaking on kind of all of our behalves for a moment here, but I feel like we're in this because this is truly fun and cutting edge, and keeps us on our toes and keeps us engaged on a constant basis. And so, what have been sort of like the latest trends in general that have been really kind of like, what rabbit holes have you all been kind of going down recently of just trends that are just absolutely fascinating, cutting edge in this kind of sector of the blockchain security?
Bridge hacks. I have the unenviable position of having to defend a very large bridge that so far hasn't gotten popped. So far I'm doing something right. But yeah, what is it, 13, 14 bridge hacks so far in 2022? That's a lot of postmortems to read and to really dig into. That's very concerning, and that is a trend that I spend a lot of time thinking about.
Yeah, it's a good question. What's the most cutting edge thing? I don't know that it's like the thing that I've been thinking about a lot, and I don't know that it's like super cutting edge. Well, I factually know that it's not, but I think it's a shift in behavior, specifically for individual consumers, for retail investors, is a movement more towards self-custody. That seems to be like a trend that is increasing, and that is producing some interesting business dynamics for the ecosystem, but I think some interesting security dynamics for individuals, right? Like, we talk about having sophisticated security programs, and that's really kind of advice to like institutions, but your average everyday Main Street crypto investor has no security program, right? They have no team, they're just like them. And that seems to be a trend where they're increasingly holding assets thanks to technology that, like folks like Ledger and others that are offering kind of these self-custody options. So I think that will be something that we're going to see kind of a whiplash effect of increased fraud, increased compromise, things along those lines on the REITs that are targeting specifically retail users.
Yeah, for me, what's interesting is the proliferation of multiple different types of chains expanding throughout the ecosystem, and it as an application developer or a company that's looking to launch, you have to make a decision on which chain you want to launch on. And so this whole interoperability, bridging of assets across chains, and how eventually this will all merge together is just a really interesting space, in my opinion, where everybody's trying to recruit talent to build on their ecosystem, because that's how you gain popularity and gain foot traffic on your chains. But it's not an easy thing to do, and the more chains that launch, it's now you have to make a decision, which chains will you support.
Yeah, the technical, I feel for the Coinbase technical diligence team and all of the all the requests of every single token and coin and concept that comes your way. I can only imagine. I didn't want to hog up all of the questions here. I know that we have a couple about 10 more minutes left here. There are a couple of community questions, and so one I felt was quite near and dear certainly to Halborn's heart, because we certainly focus on all things like sort of off chain as well as on chain. But in general, do you all feel that there's too much of a focus on the shiny object of crypto smart contract audits? And are we missing the points in general of those integrations? So feel free to.
I'd love to take that one. Look, I think that smart contract, that's like one tiny piece of a gigantic puzzle, and even more to the point, like I feel like there's a real challenge to shift left. I'm pushing that in my role, but I think many newer companies fail to understand that. Let's spend 4 months, 6 months building an entire product. Then when we're done, let's think about security and get a security audit. And now we're done. Security is on, and now we can launch. Like, this is obviously a terrible way to do security. So the question is, how can you stop focusing on the shiny security audit and move that into your development pipeline, into your CI/CD pipeline, into your developers' IDE, into your developers' brains by training them not to make mistakes in the first place, into design decisions at the architectural design phase that are good decisions and not bad decisions. And I think that the focus on post-development audits really detracts from the overall security of the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to note that a lot of the smart contracts that have been hacked has had security audits. It's not like they didn't have security audits. So it starts with the architecture and just understanding what parts of the logic do you want on chain and what parts do you want off chain, what parts do you want decentralized, which parts do you want, at launch centralized, and making that risk decision and helping the business make those risk decisions.
That was great. I'll just say yes, I do think there's too much focus on it as a shiny object and let everyone else's narrative stand.
Yeah, I love it. So there's another community question that's really near and dear to my partner's heart, Steve Walbro, who's really always kind of talks to me and hints to me about there's this idea of that we're always focused on all these sort of ancillary things, but isn't there more of a systemic risk out there with all the things going on in this ecosystem? And so, basically this idea of the way beyond the ability of any human to understand, like, can software ever be truly secure? Isn't there always a likelihood for a catastrophic vulnerability? And what are our thoughts on that?
Nothing will be truly secure. Yes, there's a risk for a catastrophic vulnerability. Reasonable safeguards must be in place, but you can't solve for every possible doomsday scenario, right? And I'm somebody who definitely fancies himself a kind of like borderline doomsday prepper, but you can't solve for every possible edge case. I think if we were to actually like threat model out all of this and like risk rank them, there are far more existential risks to the overall ecosystem that are non-technical versus the technical risks. If we stack rank these across like a risk register.
I think that it's important to take the question in context. I agree with everything Adam just said, but I think that if you compare the systemic risks to the incredible degree of centralization we have in our overall internet architecture right now, I mean, what happens when AWS goes down? Trains stop moving, people die in hospital. All right, Bitcoin explodes, nobody's going to die. They're going to go bankrupt, but they're not going to fucking die. Sorry for my language. You know what I mean? Like, Facebook's like door lock IoT device broke and Facebook went down for 6 hours. A communication platform relied on by like 1 billion people in the developing world. Now that is systemic risk caused by extreme centralization, central points of failure and compromise. Now, do we face systemic risk in decentralization? Yes, but I think in context, there's much higher likelihood and higher impact scenarios in centralized infrastructure.
100%. This is great. There's an amalgamation of many questions that effectively lead to the fact that, as of today, it's not like there's an OWASP top 10 in blockchain. There's certainly concepts that we can all kind of agree with. The current CVSS scoring doesn't exactly fit. So, is there another scoring system? What can we be doing as an industry to kind of advance all of that, to create some standards out there?
So this is something we've actually thought a lot about, and we like CCSS. we like web trust, we like SOC, we like ISO, we like NIST, we like all of it. The reality is none of it was designed for the different flavors of the things that we worry about, right? There's kind of a series of things that are kind of, I would say, unique to securing crypto and to managing security for a crypto company. And what we've looked at is kind of all of those control sets and some handful of more obscure ones. There's a bunch of NIST special publications and others. And we've kind of said, okay, this is the superset. Now, what's the subset of that makes the most sense for the things that we care about? And that's the kind of control set then that we're going to manage to. And I just don't see a lot of, I think like we often ask, like, if you're onboarding a vendor or, depending on how much firm you're at, it's like, oh, like, do you have a SOC 2? Yes, that's good. But that's good to check the box, but it doesn't obviously like address some of the core problems that could be surfaced. So I think you have to be very pragmatic about it. We like to cast a very wide net and then pare that down to across all these different control bodies. What's the subset of things that we care about? And then also, where are we getting the most signal? Like, so, you can care about 100 things, but if you can only really capture signal on 10 of them, the other 90 is just like, lines on an Excel file.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we've accumulated a whole database of signals and things that we need to look out for. And the only way that it's scalable is by automating it. So we've done a lot of automation there's no product out there today in the industry that does a good job, even a reasonably good job in detecting these things. So it just takes experience. You want to make sure that you learn from the mistakes of others. So if you see hacks, every hack that you see out there, you should update your model to make sure that the probability of that happening is just that much higher now, and just keep learning from what's going on externally, and then relying on your internal team to be more predictive.
More philosophically speaking, I think that measuring cybersecurity risk is an unsolved problem in computer science. We can approximate it, we can sort of put numbers to it, but there is a significant art fudge factor here. Like it's at least 50% art and 50% science, in my view. Like, you have the numbers, but now you need the judgment and experience to say, well, this matters and this doesn't matter. And we're not really approaching a world where I have 150 years worth of hurricane landfall data for South Florida, and I can now do actuarial science on the probability of a hurricane landfall on this date in this city in Florida, right? Like, we are nowhere near that level of actuarial science and risk management. It's really about, it's like, okay, which way is the wind blowing today, and how do I feel? What do I have for breakfast, and what are the numbers, right? So it's hard.
It makes total sense. That it's very hard. So I wanted to end, I know that we're wrapping up here. I wanted to end on one particularly interesting question that I absolutely loved, and I feel like we can all kind of appreciate this. So the panel's opinion on how we as a crypto community can achieve true nation state attack resistance. Go.
Which nation state?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just, pick,
I mean, look, I think that's fair, right? Like, if we're talking like North Korea, then like we can talk just like get better at core cyber hygiene and like educating your employees and like SDLC and all, get better at that. If we're talking, maybe some other threat actors, some other countries, I think the answer is, back to some of the previous talk around like centralization. Like, the answer right now might be we can't. If you're talking to like the U.S., like, what if the U.S. becomes a nation state adversary of crypto? Because now that they see it as a threat to the dollar, they're now mobilizing the weight of the U.S. against the crypto infrastructure ecosystem. Like, you're not winning that one. It's still like crypto, like, until like we get better with launching satellites, like crypto still leverages the internet, right? So it's like the internet is critical infrastructure. Like, blockchains running are just a couple national security letters to ISPs away from getting degraded to a point where they're unusable. So I mean, like, it just depends on the nation state.
I mean, my advice to the community is just keep building, keep experimenting. The threats will evolve, and your ability to defend is the sophistication of how well you're able to build. So keep building and keep learning.
I think that there are 10 years ago, crypto didn't exist, and people thought it couldn't exist, and now it does exist, and it's not perfect, but there's all sorts of interesting innovations on the horizon that could change the offense-defense calculus there. I mean, you know, it's hard to disagree with anything that's just said. If it's not North Korea and it's a major power, then they tolerate our existence because they choose to leave us alone.
Amazing. I couldn't think of better responses to end this panel on. So I'm just going to wrap it up there. I really want to thank all of you for joining in the community, and want to thank our three panelists today. This was really fantastic, and thank you.